Good morning and thanks for tuning in. You're watching All You Need to Know on BloombergQuint Live and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says the coronavirus poses a threat to growth in the U.S. and across the globe. The outbreak has so far killed 1,112 people worldwide. Arvind Kejriwal is set for a third term as Chief Minister of Delhi after the Aam Aadmi Party wins 62 out of the 70 assembly seats. The BJP wins the other 8, while the Congress once again draws a blank. The final hearing of a fugitive Indian businessman, Vijay Mallya, began at the London High Court on Tuesday. Mallya's lawyers say that the previous order ignores the actual circumstances which led to the failure of Kingfisher Airlines. Coal India meets estimates in the third quarter. Lower realizations and higher other expenses weighed on the company's bottom line. And Hindalco Industries is the only Nifty company that will be reporting its third quarter numbers today. Let's talk about the U.S. markets now. It was a subdued day of trade for the U.S. markets. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq ended out with moderate gains. They managed to eke out gains, but they still managed to lodge fresh record highs, and the Dow Jones ended completely unchanged. Renita Young of Bloomberg News gets you the complete wrap of the trading session on Wall Street in this report.
U.S. stocks ended mixed on Tuesday as investors awaited more information from Fed Chair Jay Powell and digested more of his remarks to Congress during the first of a two-day testimony on Capitol Hill. Investors also shrugged off a little bit of the concerns about the coronavirus. Nevertheless, some of them still remain, and we're still in the middle of corporate earnings season. During the session, we saw T-Mobile winning court approval for a $26.5 billion takeover of Sprint. AutoNation's fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share for continuing operations beat the highest analyst estimate, and Hasbro gained after a fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share that beat the highest analyst estimate as well. More earnings to come include Lyft, Western Union, and Dish Network. Meanwhile, WTI crude oil was a little bit higher. Gold, however, was lower, and Fed Chair Jay Powell continues his testimony on Wednesday. That's a look at your Tuesday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
The number of cases of the novel coronavirus continue to rise. The current count now stands at 43,000, while over 1,100 people have died. However, there are some encouraging signs as this rise in new infections was the slowest since the 1st of February. Selena Wang of Bloomberg News brings you the latest in this report.
Health experts say it's too early to say if containment has been successful, but we did see Hubei province reporting more than 1,600 new cases today. Obviously still a significant number, but lower than the more than 2,000 cases that have been reported in recent subsequent days. The death toll now rising to more than 1,100. The total number of cases in Hubei province rising to more than 33,000. We did have that World Health Organization press briefing where the Director General finally gave this virus a name. It's called COVID-19. The Director General said it's important to give this virus as an official name so that other names don't emerge that can be inaccurate or stigmatizing. The organization is also hosting a meeting of hundreds of scientists from around the world to try and figure out a research roadmap and figure out what the health priorities are here, given that a development of the first vaccine is still some 18 months away. But in the meantime, the organization is sending supplies to other countries to help diagnose, treat patients. You also have strengthening lab capacities around the world. And here in Beijing, the streets are still much emptier and quieter than usual. And across China, even though offices some of them are officially restarting businesses, citizens are still dealing with inconveniences in daily lives. Some citizens are feeling suffocated. There are still pretty stringent rules across the country. One of the most common restrictions are to impose lockdowns on residential areas. And for instance, one city in Shanghai tried to implement a rule where residents can only send one family member outside once every 4 days. So pretty strict there.
Yeah, and Selena, as of course parts of the economy kind of trickle back online, people go back to work, what are the latest indicators that we're seeing on the impact on trade and economic activity?
We are still seeing a pretty significant impact on trade and economic activity in China, with China saying that the coronavirus outbreak may delay U.S. farm good purchases, though they will likely ultimately reach those pacts made in the Phase 1 trade deal. The soy outlook remains on track, with soy crushers now resuming operations, but there have been delays for corn sales because of some transport blockages. But to try and reduce the impact, the Chinese government has been trying to encourage regions that have been less hard hit by the coronavirus to accelerate production as fast as possible. But there are massive challenges here. Obviously, you have many companies and factories getting tied up in local government regulations. For instance, they need to have enough masks, hand sanitizer, protective equipment to start, but some factories can't do so because there have been shortages in some regions of those goods. Other factories are dealing with delays because employees are still stuck because of travel restrictions, because of quarantines. So really no surprise here that economists are continuing to lower their economic forecasts, now coming down to 5.8% for 2020 GDP from 5.9%.
All right, let's see what else is making headlines across the globe. Ritika Gupta of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
Hong Kong has suspended all cross-border land transport between the airport and mainland China until further notice, as the government tries to stem the impact of the coronavirus. The decision comes as governments take action to restrict travel and other cross-border links, with virus deaths topping 1,000 and showing few signs of slowing. Hong Kong has already imposed quarantine curbs on mainland travellers. Fed Chairman Jay Powell says policymakers are on high alert over the coronavirus outbreak and its threat to the U.S. economy, adding he's ready to act if needed. Addressing lawmakers on Capitol Hill, he said the infection will have an impact on the U.S., with the only questions being the scope and persistence of the damage. Powell added he remains optimistic about the U.S. economy and growth. Bernie Sanders has opened a commanding lead in the Democratic presidential race ahead of former Vice President Joe Biden. Ahead of today's New Hampshire primary, the Monmouth University poll gives him a 10% lead with the support of more than a quarter of Democrats nationally, with Biden slightly ahead of Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. The poll is broadly in line with other surveys. Fugitive financier Joe Low is facing new charges related to Malaysia's 1MDB scandal. He and two Petrosaudi directors are accused of a criminal conspiracy with former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak. In an inquiry into the potential loss of billions of dollars, U.S. prosecutors estimate that at least $4 billion was siphoned off the 1MDB investment fund. The accused face up to 20 years in jail. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
All right, well, let's now go across to Nikki Mirchandani, who's joining us to tell us all about the stocks that we have to watch out for in trade today. Nikki, morning. What are the stocks that you're looking at this morning?
Sure, a bunch of earnings that I'll cover first. Hindalco will be reporting number, but then the subsidiary Novelis has already reported numbers yesterday night on a consolidated basis. If you look at the net sales, the top line growth is down by 10%. Net income is up, however, by 37%, and the adjusted EBITDA is up by 7%. The lower sales is essentially on back of lower aluminium prices and the local market premium. EBITDA has increased, driven by the portfolio optimization efforts and the operating cost. Novelis remains, however, very optimistic on the growth outlook for can shipments as well as autos. Next in the list, we're looking at Ircon International, where if you look at the top line performance, it's a 3% downtick there. Profitability hours jumped higher by more than 50%. That comes on back of EBITDA performance to an extent, which has risen by 13%. Margins essentially have been aided by raw material costs and other expenses, and also tax reversals and other income has aided the bottom line performance of the company. IDBI Bank, where the net loss had just widened, now it stands at around 5,763 crore. Asset quality, however, remains to be stable, so fairly mixed set of numbers there. Hexaware Technologies, where the dollar revenue is up by 1.8% QOQ, revenue is up by 3.2% in rupee terms. Net profitability has taken a hit, and margins have fairly contracted a little bit to 3.4% as compared to 13.4% as compared to 13.9%. The financials to an extent have been impacted by extended furloughs and the ongoing ramp downs in the top BFS clients. We also looking at BHEL, where if you look at the top line performance there seems to be a little bit of disappointment there, 22% downtick. However, the operational performance, that has been improved by the lower other expenses, which in turn has led to an uptick of 49%. Two stocks that we'll keep an eye out in news-related development will be JSPL, where the subsidiary, Australian subsidiary, will come in for hearing for restructuring of its operational debt. Any restructuring of international debt could improve JSPL's cash flow going forward and is expected to have a positive reaction. IndusInd Bank, where Moody's has gone ahead and changed the outlook on this counter to negative from stable. So expect some amount of negative traction on account of that.
All right, thanks so much for that, Nikki. Let's take a look at the trade setup for the day now. Darshan Mehta is joining me to tell you all about that and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. Darshan, we've had a look at some of the stocks that are likely to be buzzing in trade today, but yesterday was a positive session. Are we likely to see that continue today as well?
Probably it will be a positive start because global cues are decent. The SGX Nifty is indicating a positive outlook of 25 points at this point of time. So the trend certainly seems to be on the positive side. We ended with the positive bias yesterday. The Nifty was up 75 points, so there was traction. But the broader market didn't participate. So the mid cap and the small cap end of the market, even though in the positive, were rather flat in trade. As far as the Nifty Bank is concerned, that again saw fresh buying that came in. The PSU Bank was also slightly muted in trade yesterday. Now, how did the ADRs pan out in trade? Again, overall decent gains that coming in from the ADR side. Vedanta, Tata Motors, HDFC Bank, all of them having gains in excess of 1%. Dr. Reddy's was up 1.2%, factoring in what we had in terms of the movement here. So the traction seems to be on the positive side. Now, the flows, FIs were net sellers to the tune of 200 crores, DIs were buyers to the tune of 345 crores. In terms of which stocks contributed, the Nifty was up 76 points, and basically Reliance aided the Nifty, the ICICI Bank aided the Bank Nifty, and SBI was up 5 points. What didn't do well was Bharti Airtel, TCS, HUL and M&M. So M&M continued with the weakness post for the second day in a row after the numbers. And now, in terms of how did the F&O market pan out in trade, the Nifty was up 76 points. So if we can have, we are seeing that there was short covering that was seen. The premium has now moved to 18 points on the Nifty futures. The Bank Nifty continues to see fresh buying. Open interest built up of 9% on the long side. Now, in terms of where our positions being built, again, 12,000 seems to be the big support that the market is looking at, and at high levels, 12,500. And since the market is rallying significantly, put writers would have been very, very active. So take a look at what changed in trade yesterday. So put writers active at 12,000, 12,100, and since the market moved up, call writers at 12,000 and 12,100 were forced to shed positions in open interest. So that's the setup as far as trade is concerned. The VIX was down 2% given the fact that the market was looking very, very strong. PCR obviously had to move up because put writers are much more aggressive in the market today. Now, as far as individual stocks are concerned and where positions were being built, Balkrishna Industries at record highs, open interest built up of 19%. Nalco reacted negatively to the numbers. It was down 5%. Again, fresh buying was seen in Siemens post the numbers, but the brokerage reports do indicate that it's a weak performance, probably should react in the negative today. In terms of counters in which there was an open interest decline, Indiabulls Housing Finance saw a massive amount of short covering that came in, and GAIL was the other one which saw good amount of short covering that came in.
All right, thanks so much for that, Darshan. So there you have it. That's the trade setup for the day. But yesterday's headline was, in fact, not related to business or markets. It was politics that was in front and center. The recently concluded assembly elections in Delhi was the headline, where the Aam Aadmi Party stormed back to power, winning 62 out of the 70 seats in assembly. Kaushik Vaidya spoke to BJP's Gopal Agarwal and Aditi Fadnis of Business Standard and discussed everything that led to the result and also what the clean sweep entails.
The thing is that certain narration started where BJP as an ideological commitment party is having a strong positions, and certain things were being misinformed to the people in Delhi. And the other thing was with whether it was this Citizenship Amendment Act, lot of misinformation was being fed by the opposition party. Their we could not, I think, connect with the people about their fears, etc. That may be one thing. And the second was the issue with regard to this politics of giving free those things like water, electricity, metro ride, etc., which have a short-term benefit, but ultimately BJP did not go for those commitments. So these are two important issues where I think we could not people connect with the people and convince them that they should come and vote for BJP. That is one thing. And one thing I would just like to mention is that earlier we had seen an politics of appeasement. Minority was considered as a vote bank, and now in this current election, AAP suddenly changed from minority appeasement to the majority appeasement and vote bank share for the majority. As a party, we have already every time stood that we do not go for appeasement, particularly minority appeasement, and we stood by that narration.
Mr. Kejriwal would argue not. Mr. Kejriwal would argue that the limited bit of his Hindu identity that he tried to show was in counter to claims that were made about him by the BJP. I wish to get into strategy and not necessarily pointing to the other party right now. So I want to get more on what the BJP has chosen to run its strategy on. And in that, Aditi Fadnis, earlier today you wrote, and I read, the BJP will have to seriously rethink its strategy. Mr. Shah did nearly 40 election meetings. Prime Minister Modi held 2. This is by no means a referendum on the leadership of either of them. But you asked the question, what I did before, is why does that leadership, or has it been able to win election after election in a 5-year cycle going back a few years in state after state, but fallen short in Delhi?
Basically, I think what has happened in this election is that Arvind Kejriwal gave people an alternative model of religious belief, an alternative model of nationalism, and an alternative model of welfareism. And I think we need to understand this in the way that that it appealed to the people. People were, I think, a bit put off by the aggressive kind of appeal that the BJP was forwarding, but did not mind committing themselves to the much more moderate appeal of Arvind Kejriwal and his colleagues. So I think these appeasement, minority, majority, these are all things which have run their course. What is needed perhaps is something in between. The Congress, if you recall, used to agonize over soft Hindutva. It found the adoption of soft Hindutva very negative. But I think Kejriwal and Aam Aadmi Party have adopted and adapted their own version of nationalism and religiosity, which could, going forward, be adopted and adapted by other opposition parties as well. And this could be a bit of a threat to the BJP in the future.
Well, what does this mean? So that's the question. What does this mean for other elections in other parts of the country? Will it pose, as the question was just posed, a threat to the BJP? Not necessarily so. Take West Bengal, for example. There's a history of deep communal polarization in West Bengal, which is largely muted in Delhi, according to Swaraj India President Yogendra Yadav. In a conversation with BloombergQuint on the Aam Aadmi Party's sweeping victory in the Delhi elections yesterday, Yadav explains why it will be difficult to replicate an Aam Aadmi Party-like model for an election campaign in West Bengal. Listen in.
I think this fundamental difference between a place like Delhi and West Bengal is not about a city-state governance or the division between 3 governance versus the standard model in West Bengal. The real difference is history of deep communal polarization in West Bengal, which is by and large much muted in Delhi. So it was much easier to handle in Delhi. West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee may find it much more difficult because the emotive issues are present there. Bangladeshi immigrants are present there. Hindu-Muslim tensions within that do exist. So that would be a far more important thing. To my mind, the fact that you have a three-tier structure in Delhi in some ways militated against the BJP, because BJP was partly answerable for what's happening in Delhi. They control MCD, they control central government. So they were answerable, and therefore they had to come up with some information to people of Delhi as to what they had done for Delhi. And frankly, they had nothing to offer.
All right, let's turn to earnings now. Coal India reported a decline in both its top line and bottom line, but this was largely on expected lines. Nikki Mirchandani is joining back to tell you all about the fine print. Nikki.
Just a line set of numbers, nothing home to write about. If you also look at the dividend, the company did not declare any dividend, but then most of the brokerages estimate or expect the dividend to come through in the coming weeks. Top line first, where the company has reported 7.5% downtake there to a number of around 23,190 crore as compared to an estimate of a figure less than 23,000 crore. EBITDA came in at 4,968 crore, which was down by 26% and in line with the estimate. Margin came in at 21% as compared to 27%, and profitability that has taken a hit by as much as 14%. What goes behind the making of the numbers is flat realization along with the higher operating expenses. Now, on the higher operating expenses bit, we saw a jump in employee expenses and the contractual expenses, which weighed on the operational performance of the company. To an extent, however, higher other income aided the profitability of the company. Look at the volume breakup first, where e-auction volumes, they've been to the lowest that we've seen in the history for Coal India. They have come down by as much as 33% year-on-year basis, and way lower than what the street was estimating. And also the FSA volumes, they have taken a hit to an extent of 6% odd. Weak thermal demand along with extended monsoons overall has led to a slip in offtake, which is to an extent of 33%. Talk about realization. FSA realizations have been fairly stable on account of the improvement in grade that we've seen, but then the e-auction realization, that's clearly one of the dampener, down by 8% and in turn weighed on the earning performance of the company. However, if you look at the valuations at this point of time, pretty much cheap, and brokerages, most of them have maintained the buy rating and the target price after fairly inline set of numbers.
Thanks so much for that, Nikki. Now, lower costs of alumina is likely to benefit Hindalco's standalone business, but the same lower prices of alumina may also hurt its downstream business. Nikki, you're looking at this company as well. What is this about?
Right, we're not expecting a good set of numbers even from Hindalco for that matter. It's on account of the lower aluminium prices and the cost matrix, which to an extent may aid the standalone business first. But then if you look at the top line growth for standalone division year-on-year basis, we're expecting a 14% downtake there. EBITDA, however, is expected to go up by 6% on account of that lower alumina cost, which is nothing but a key raw material used behind the making of aluminium. Margins are expected to be improving a little bit, 10% as compared to 8% in the corresponding quarter. However, the profitability is expected to be weighed down by the depreciation in finance costs, down by as much as 21.9%. In terms of the sales volume picture, we are expecting flattish sales coming in from the aluminium division, and copper division, however, is expected to take a hit by as much as 14.1%. But if you look at standalone plus Utkal division, which is also the downstream subsidiary, where you've seen the impact of lower alumina prices actually weighing down on the numbers. Revenue down by 14.5%, EBITDA down by 35%, margins contracting to 10% as compared to 15%. What we'd like to watch out for, apart from this, would be the management guidance on Alvarez and the acquisition which is panning out, and the production cost of aluminium segment going forward.
All right, Nikki. Well, there you have it. That's the earnings that you have to watch out for in trade today. Of course, you'll find all of that right here on BloombergQuint Live. You'll also find several stories on the website, BloombergQuint.com, if you were to take a look. Now, in a positive, here's one of them, a somewhat positive sign for economic activity in the country. Cargo handled by Indian ports rose for the second straight month in January, but at a slower pace as volumes of liquid cargo fell, according to a report by Goldman Sachs. Now, Indian ports handled 620 lakh tons of cargo last month, a rise of 2.5% over January of 2019, and that compares with a 6% increase in December 2019 at 609.6 lakh tons, which was the fastest pace in 14 months. Now, Moody's Investor Service has lowered its outlook on IndusInd Bank to account for the risk of further deterioration in asset quality. The rating agency changed its outlook to negative from stable, but affirmed that the private lender's domestic and foreign currency ratings would remain at Baa3, which is an investment grade. That, according to Moody's, was driven by the bank's strong capital and profitability buffers, which result in a strong ability to absorb asset quality stress. All right, that's all you need to know going into trade today, but do stay tuned. There's a lot more that you'll find on BloombergQuint.